A struggling single dad walks into Manhattan's fanciest restaurant with his 6-year-old daughter for a business meeting that never happens. His client cancels. He can barely afford the water they ordered. From across the room, a woman watches them. Rebecca Harrison, billionaire CEO worth $3.5 billion, dining alone in her usual corner table. She sees how he tenderly cuts his daughter's food, wipes her tears, whispers that everything will be okay despite having nothing. And something inside this powerful woman, who built an empire but has no family, completely breaks. She stands up, walks to their table, and asks a question that will change 3 lives forever. "May I join you for dinner?" And this is the true story of how one spontaneous decision created the most beautiful family none of them expected. What city are you watching this video from and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. It was a November night when David Miller, a 32-year-old single father, walked into the most elegant restaurant in Manhattan with his daughter Emma, age 6, for what he thought was a routine business dinner. He worked as a freelance IT technician, earning barely enough to support himself and the child after his wife abandoned them 2 years earlier. He didn't know that the woman sitting at the corner table was Rebecca Harrison, the millionaire CEO of the largest tech company in America, who that night had decided to lay off half her staff to increase profits. But when Rebecca saw David sweetly explaining the menu to Emma, wiping away her tears when she felt uncomfortable in the overly elegant place, and whispering to her that everything was okay, something broke in her icy heart. The maternal instinct she had suppressed for years to dedicate herself to success suddenly awakened, and what happened when she invited them to her table would forever change the destiny of 3 lives. That of a father who had given up everything for love, that of a girl who had never known maternal affection, and that of a woman who was about to discover that true power is not measured in millions, but in innocent smiles and sincere hugs. David Miller looked at his watch for the 5th time as he waited in the lobby of the Summit restaurant in the heart of Manhattan. Behind him, Emma gripped his hand tightly, her brown eyes wide as she took in the elegance surrounding her. Crystal chandeliers, immaculate white tablecloths, tuxedoed waiters moving with choreographed precision. At 32, David had learned that life rarely goes as planned. 2 years earlier, he was a happily married man with a stable job as a programmer. Then Sarah, his wife, decided that marriage and motherhood weren't for her. She left one morning while Emma was sleeping, leaving only a note and the emptiness of a broken family. Since then, he'd worked as a freelancer, taking any IT project that came his way. It was harder, the income irregular, but at least he could manage his schedule to be with Emma. The child went to daycare in the morning and he picked her up at 1 p.m. to take her to her paternal grandmother's while he worked in the afternoon. That night, he was supposed to meet with a potential client for a software development project. The appointment had been set at this luxury restaurant, but at the last moment, the babysitter got sick. He couldn't afford to lose this job, so he had brought Emma with him, hoping for the client's understanding. Emma wore her best dress, the gray one with a white collar he'd bought her for her birthday. Her brown hair was pulled back in 2 neat ponytails, and she clutched her favorite doll, Rosa, which she never let go of when she felt nervous. The maitre d' escorted them to the reserved table. David immediately noticed the curious glances from the other guests. A 6-year-old child in a restaurant like this wasn't common. He sat down nervously, helping Emma get comfortable in the high chair the waiter had brought. From across the restaurant, Rebecca Harrison watched the scene with growing interest. At 40, she was used to controlling every situation, reading people like open books. But there was something about this young father that drew her attention. The way he cared for the child, how he explained the menu to her in a low voice, how he calmed her when she seemed intimidated by the elegant atmosphere. Rebecca had arrived for a business dinner that was canceled at the last minute. Instead of leaving, she had decided to stay to relax, something she rarely allowed herself. She was seated at her usual table, the corner one that guaranteed her privacy and a view of the entire venue. Her life was a succession of meetings, business trips, decisions that affected thousands of employees. As CEO of Harrison Technologies, she managed an empire valued at $3.5 billion. She had never had time for a family, always postponing it, concentrating on her career. Now, at 40, She found herself alone at the top of success. As she watched David and Emma, something stirred in her chest. She saw the father delicately cutting meat for the child, pouring water into the correct glass, smiling at her when she told him something about her day at daycare. It was a picture of tenderness that Rebecca had never experienced, neither as a daughter nor as a mother. David's client didn't show up. After an hour of waiting, he received an apologetic message. He was visibly disappointed, but tried not to show it to Emma. He called the waiter to ask for the check for the drinks they had ordered, mentally calculating whether he could afford at least one dish for Emma. It was at that moment that Rebecca made an impulsive decision. She got up from her table and approached them. David looked at her confused when she stopped by the table. She was an elegant woman, self-assured, with clothes that probably cost more than his monthly rent. The approach was direct but gentle. Rebecca had noticed that they had been waiting for a long time and that his guest hadn't arrived. When she asked if she could join them for dinner, explaining that she was also eating alone, Emma responded before David with the spontaneity typical of children. She immediately accepted, saying that Daddy had always taught her that sharing food makes everything taste better. And so, without knowing that two completely different worlds were about to meet, began an evening that would change 3 lives forever. Rebecca sat at the table with natural grace, but inside she felt an agitation she hadn't experienced in years. She never did anything impulsive. Every action of hers was calculated, planned, strategic. But something about this big-eyed child and this attentive father had bypassed all her rational defenses. David was still incredulous. Who was this woman? Why did she want to have dinner with them? Her clothes, the discreet but expensive jewelry, the way the waiters treated her with special deference. Everything suggested she was someone important. But Emma didn't seem intimidated. On the contrary, she had already started chatting with disarming naturalness. Emma introduced herself with a smile that melted anyone's heart, explaining that her daddy was David, and complimenting Rebecca on her beauty, comparing her to the princesses in her books. When the child asked with childish curiosity if she had an important job, Rebecca explained simply that she ran a company that produced computers and phones. During dinner, Rebecca gradually discovered David's story. Without it seeming like an interrogation, she managed to learn that he was a freelance programmer raising Emma alone for 2 years, that he struggled every day to give the child everything she needed with limited resources. David, for his part, was fascinated by this woman, not only by her obvious wealth and success, but by the way she interacted with Emma. She really listened when she spoke, asked intelligent questions about her drawings, treated her like a person, not like a child who had to be tolerated. When Rebecca asked if Emma was already in school, David explained that she attended daycare and that the following year she would start elementary school. Regarding the choice of school, he hesitated. He had looked at several options, but the best ones were private and expensive. He would have to settle for the public school in the neighborhood, which wasn't bad, but didn't offer the same opportunities. Rebecca immediately understood the situation. She had lived in the business world long enough to recognize when someone avoided an answer out of pride. She respected his reserve, but made a mental note. Emma had started telling Rebecca about her dreams with contagious enthusiasm. She wanted to be a doctor to help people, or maybe a teacher like Miss Anna from daycare, or even an airplane pilot to see the world from above. Rebecca listened with sincere interest, assuring her that she was sure she would accomplish everything she wanted. While Emma drew on the napkin with the colored pencils the waiter had brought her, Rebecca and David talked more intimately. He told her about the difficulties of raising a child alone, how sometimes he felt inadequate, how Emma was his strength and motivation to keep going forward. Rebecca reassured him gently. Emma was clearly happy and loved, and that was all that mattered. When David expressed the desire to be able to give his daughter more, travel, experiences, opportunities, Rebecca pointed out that he was giving her the most important thing, his love and his presence. There was a sadness in her voice that David noticed but didn't comment on. When it came time to say goodbye, Emma ran to hug Rebecca as if she had known her all her life, asking with eyes full of hope if they would see each other again. Rebecca felt her heart tighten and replied that she would like that very much. They exchanged phone numbers, and as they left the restaurant, Rebecca watched them walk away hand in hand under the streetlights of Manhattan. For the first time in years, her empty, perfect house seemed extremely lonely. That night, as Emma slept beside him in their small apartment, David rethought the surreal evening. Who was Rebecca, really? And why did he have the feeling that this encounter would change something in their lives? The day after the dinner, Rebecca couldn't concentrate on work. From the window of her office on the 40th floor, she looked at Manhattan without really seeing it, thinking about Emma's bright eyes and David's tenderness. This child and this father had awakened something she had buried long ago, the desire for a real family. She made an impulsive decision, canceled all her afternoon appointments, and called David, proposing to meet at Central Park. At 4 p.m., Rebecca arrived dressed more casually. Emma ran toward her, showing her a touching drawing, 3 figures holding hands in front of a colorful house with the phrase, "My new family." The child explained innocently that the woman in the drawing was Rebecca because she had had dinner with them like a mom. They spent the afternoon talking while Emma played. Rebecca discovered that David had lost his parents at a young age, and that Sarah had abandoned them after 2 years of apparently happy marriage. When David asked about her family, Rebecca revealed her deep loneliness. Parents dead, no siblings, never married, always focused on her career until she thought it was too late for love. That night, she invited them to her penthouse, a palace of beauty but strangely cold. Emma, with the instinct of children, understood that Rebecca lived alone and offered her with childish logic to come sleep with them, where the house was small but warm. During dinner, Emma fell asleep on the sofa. As David covered her and sat beside Rebecca, they both watched the child sleep. They looked into each other's eyes and felt something deep being born. Recognition, understanding, the shared desire to create a family together. As she walked them to the door, Rebecca made a decision that would change everything. Rebecca stopped in the hallway, looking at David carrying sleeping Emma in his arms. It was an image of pure tenderness that touched something deep in her soul. What she was about to say might seem crazy, but she wanted to follow her heart instead of logic. She explained that her company needed a head of software development department, someone with practical experience who really knew code. She had seen David's portfolio online and recognized his incredible talent. The offer was extraordinary, $120,000 a year, full benefits, health insurance for him and Emma, schedule flexibility for his parenting commitments. David was speechless. It was more than double what he earned as a freelancer, but Rebecca didn't stop there. She confessed that she wanted to be part of their lives. It had never happened to her before, but the night before she had felt part of a family for the first time in 40 years. Her life was perfect on paper but empty inside. Silent apartment, dinner alone, no one to love her for who she was. Emma needed a female figure, and she needed to feel alive again. She wasn't asking for promises, just the possibility of being present, of learning what it meant to love and be genuinely loved. Emma opened her eyes at that moment, seeing Rebecca, and smiling at her with innocent sweetness. When she asked if Rebecca could come home with them, David and Rebecca looked at each other. In that simple question was all the complexity of the moment. David felt he was taking a leap into the void, but for the first time in 2 years, he didn't feel alone facing the future. He accepted. That night, Rebecca followed David and Emma to their small apartment. She helped put Emma to bed, sat at the table while David made tea, and fell asleep on the sofa covered with an old blanket, feeling more at home than she had ever felt in her millionaire penthouse. 3 months after that night, the lives of all 3 had been transformed in unimaginable ways. David had started working at Harrison Technologies, discovering that he had not only the technical skills Rebecca had intuited, but also a natural talent for leading teams and innovating processes. His colleagues, initially skeptical of what seemed like a CEO recommendation, soon recognized his authentic value. Emma had started attending St. Patrick's Academy, one of the most prestigious private schools in Manhattan. Rebecca had insisted on paying the tuition, and faced with David's resistance, had explained simply that it was an investment in the future of a brilliant child. Emma adored the new school, the science labs, the well-stocked library, the teachers who encouraged her natural curiosity. But the deepest change was in the family balance that had been created. Rebecca spent almost every night in David and Emma's apartment, preferring that small house full of life to her luxurious but empty penthouse. She had learned to cook by watching David. She had discovered the pleasure of reading bedtime stories. She had started to understand the rituals and rhythms of a real family. Emma had accepted Rebecca into their lives, with the naturalness typical of children. She didn't call her mom. That title still belonged to the painful memory of Sarah, but she had started calling her Aunt Rebecca with growing affection. Rebecca helped her with homework, took her shopping for clothes, participated in school plays sitting next to David, as if they had always been a family. One February night, while Emma was bathing singing a song learned at school, David and Rebecca were sitting on the living room sofa. He looked at her as she corrected Emma's drawings with the seriousness of an art critic, adding little hearts and stars in the margins. David suddenly asked her if she was happy. Rebecca looked up from the drawings, answering that she was happier than she had ever been. When he confessed to being afraid that everything was too good to last, that one day she would wake up realizing she deserved more than a programmer with a child, Rebecca put down the drawings and moved closer to him. She took his hands, noticing the calluses that had formed since he'd gone back to doing manual work on weekends, and explained that before meeting him, her life was perfect but empty. She had everything society considered important, but she had no purpose. She didn't have someone worth waking up for every morning. Emma called them from the bathroom. She wanted to show them how well she could swim in the bathtub. They both laughed, and when Rebecca got up to go to Emma, David stopped her by taking her hand. He confessed that he was falling in love with her. Rebecca stopped, feeling her heart race. These were the words she had hoped to hear, but had never dared to expect. She replied that she loved him too, that she loved them both more than she could express. David proposed to her right then with disarming simplicity. He asked her to marry him, to become Emma's mom, to become the family they had already chosen to be. Tears of joy began to fall from Rebecca's eyes. At 40, she had found the love she had always thought she didn't deserve. When she accepted, Emma came out of the bathroom wrapped in a pink towel, seeing her two favorite adults hugging and crying together. At the explanation that Aunt Rebecca had agreed to marry Daddy and would become her official mom, the smile that lit up Emma's face was brighter than the sun. She threw herself into Rebecca's arms with all the strength of her small body, exclaiming that she would finally have a real mom. When she asked if she could call her mom right away, Rebecca replied that nothing would make her happier. That night, while Emma slept in the bed between their two rooms, David and Rebecca began planning their future together. A future made of shared mornings, family dinners, beach vacations, birthdays and school plays. A normal yet extraordinary future, because built on true love and the conscious choice to be a family. 1 year later, St. Thomas Church in Midtown Manhattan was decorated with white roses and lilies. It was an intimate ceremony. A few close friends, some work colleagues, and naturally Emma, who had insisted on being the maid of honor in a pink dress that made her look like a little princess. Rebecca walked down the aisle in an ivory silk dress, simple but elegant, reflecting the change she had undergone. She was no longer the cold, distant CEO, but a woman who had learned to love and be loved. Her eyes shone as she looked at David, who waited for her at the altar with Emma by his side, holding the flowers with adult seriousness. During the ceremony, when it came time for the vows, Rebecca first addressed David, explaining that a year earlier she was a successful but lonely woman. She had everything she thought she wanted, but she didn't know what it meant to feel complete. He had taught her that true love isn't sought, it's recognized, and had given her the possibility to be part of something bigger. Then she turned to Emma, promising to love her, protect her, and support her forever. She promised to be the mom she deserved, to believe in her dreams and help her achieve them, to be present at every important moment of her life. Emma couldn't hold back tears of joy. When the priest declared David and Rebecca husband and wife, She ran to hug them both, and in that moment, their union was complete. The reception was held in the garden of the new house they had bought together. A cottage with a garden in the Westchester area, big enough for a family but cozy enough to feel like home. Emma had her pink room with a bookshelf full of books. David had a study to work on weekends, and Rebecca finally had a space that reflected who she had become, a wife and a mother. During the party, while Emma ran among the guests handing out candy, David and Rebecca found themselves alone in the garden gazebo. He confessed that he still couldn't believe it was all real, and she replied that her only regret was not having met them sooner. All those years lost chasing empty successes when true happiness was in a family. 6 months after the wedding, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. The news shocked her. At 41, she had never thought she could have biological children, but David and Emma welcomed the news with uncontainable joy. Little Jake was born on a radiant spring day with Rebecca's green eyes and David's brown curls. Emma was the first to hold him after the parents, promising to teach him everything she knew and always protect him. Now, 5 years after that first chance encounter at the restaurant, Rebecca looked at her family gathered in the backyard. David pushing Emma, now 12 on the swing they had built together. Jake, 4 years old, running after the dog that Emma had convinced her parents to adopt. The table set for Sunday dinner that had become a sacred tradition. She had scaled back her role in the company, delegating more to spend time with family. The company continued to prosper, but now she knew that true success was measured in goodnight hugs, shared snacks, laughter that filled the house. One night, as she was putting Jake to bed, Emma approached her brother's bed. When she asked if Rebecca remembered when they met at the restaurant, and if she thought Destiny already knew she would become her mom, Rebecca smiled, kissing her on the forehead. She explained that sometimes the universe puts the right people in the right place, at the right time, and that she was grateful every day for having ended up in that restaurant the night she met them. Emma replied by hugging her tight, that she was the best mom in the world. That night, as the whole family slept, Rebecca looked out the window at the garden illuminated by the moon. She thought about the woman she had been, alone, successful but empty, convinced that love was a luxury she couldn't afford. Now she knew that love wasn't a luxury but a necessity, not a weakness but the greatest strength in the world. She had learned that a family isn't just inherited, it's chosen every day. And every day she chose again, David, Emma, Jake, and the beautiful life they had built together. Sometimes the most beautiful things are born when you least expect them. A single father looking for work, a CEO dining alone, a child drawing families on napkins, and from their chance encounter was born the truest and most loving family Rebecca could have ever imagined. Like if you believe that true love can be born in the most unexpected encounters. Comment which moment of the story moved you most. Share to inspire those who still believe in the power of families of the heart. Subscribe for more stories of love, family, and second chances. Sometimes one dinner changes 3 lives forever. Sometimes those who have everything need exactly those who have little but love much. And sometimes the most beautiful families are formed not by blood but by choice. Because true love doesn't look at the bank account, but at the account of the heart.